Eyes.
So I see a trend.
I wasn't going to do that, but I had to because it is about eyes. And then I'm like, this is it. People will get it if they heard last week's, right? Okay.
hmm Welcome back to the Modern Lady Podcast. You're listening to episode 58. Hi, I'm Michelle.
And I'm Lindsay, and today we are talking about angry moms.
Most of us are familiar with the maxim, you can't pour from an empty cup. True that we cannot give when we have needs that are unmet. And yet, how many times do we let ourselves run dry and then wonder why we simply have nothing left to give? A little bit of self-awareness and care in the area of our unmet needs can certainly go a long way.
But first, if you are enjoying the Modern Lady Podcast, we would be so honored if you could take a minute to rate and review us on whatever platform you use to listen to podcasts. It only takes a minute, but it really helps us stand out. When you take the time to comment, it really makes our day.
This week's shout out goes to listener My Thumb, who left us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and said, quote, I just really enjoy this podcast. Keep coming back to check to see if there is a new one yet. I think I'll re-listen because they are that good. I feel like I know them and have routine chats over a cup of coffee. I love you ladies. End quote. Thank you so much for your rating and review. We are so glad that you've been enjoying the show so much. And if you would like to leave us a comment, you can do so on our website, www.themodernlady1950.wordpress.com, or you can leave us a comment on Facebook or Instagram, where you can find us at The Modern Lady Podcast. But before we get into today's chat, Lindsay has our Modern Lady Tip of the Week.
There's something I've noticed lately within my own family, and it is a lack of eye contact. So I first noticed with my husband, Jason, that he doesn't actually make eye contact when he's telling stories to people, but he does when people are talking to him. This got me thinking about eye contact. Eye contact has always come fairly naturally to me, so it wasn't something that I thought too much about. And this is actually incredibly common, and there's a ton of information about this online. I was drawn to a 3-part article published by the University of Michigan, and here are some of their tips for learning how to make eye contact. Number 1, use the 50-70 rule. Maintain eye contact 50% of the time when you are talking, and 70% of the time when you are listening. Number 2, maintain eye contact for 4 to 5 seconds at a time so that it shows you're connected, but that you're not like just staring, which is awkward. Number 3, think about where you are looking and keep your eyes steady. I once heard that you should look at the space between someone's eyes, right at the top of their nose, and it actually appears to them that you are looking them in their eyes, but you're not actually doing that. Number 4, establish eye contact before the conversation even starts, as you open the door to greet people, as you walk into a room, as someone walks towards you, etc. And number 5, like with everything else, practice makes perfect. So practice with family, and you can even practice by looking in your own eyes in the mirror. Now, one last thing. Pope Francis asked that we remind ourselves of the God-given dignity that all people have, and particularly homeless people. He said that it's important that we look them in the eyes as we walk past them, and we offer them a smile. It's important that we see people and that they see that we see them. That look can say things that sometimes we don't have the perfect words for.
That 50-70 rule is interesting because
Mhm.
when we record the podcast, we're actually not looking at each other.
Yes.
It's more like a phone call, right?
Yeah.
But I do find when you are talking, I'm looking at the computer monitor. And when I'm talking, my eyesight, I look up like as I'm thinking, and I'm not making quite as much quote, eye contact with you, even though I can't see you. So, very interesting observation.
And what maybe our listeners would be interested to know that when we were first deciding to do a podcast, we had really talked about, were we going to do it like via Skype, right? Something where we could see each other, because how do you carry on a conversation without, you have a little broadcasting background, I don't, but when you're just doing something like via a radio, right? When you don't get to see who's listening, and that takes some practice, as we've learned.
Yes.
And hopefully we've gotten a little bit better at.
As human beings, we all have a lot of needs, don't we? physical needs like food and shelter, emotional needs, which we find in our relationships, amongst others. It seems like it's such a delicate balance we need to strike between meeting our own needs as well as being aware of the needs of others. And on top of everything else we need to do day to day, these needs of ours can easily fall to the bottom of the list and forgotten, right?
Yeah. So we've talked before about self care, and it's talked a lot about, it's a really popular
Hmm.
topic right now. But there was an image that circulated on social media this week that really struck me and a lot of other moms because it was like, are you an angry mom or do you just need these things? And I was like, yes, I am an angry mom. But then I'm like, maybe I'm not. Right.
Yeah.
So suddenly, all of us moms who thought I'm just an angry mom, we actually felt really heard and validated actually reading this very simple infographic. And that was made by a woman named Bryce Reddy. And she's on Instagram at mombrain.therapist. And we just discovered her account like minutes before
Hmm.
doing this episode. And her Instagram account looks like it's chock full of more information like this. So I think you and I are going to be a little busy looking through all that later.
Oh,
But
yes.
yeah, we want to break apart this one. I don't know. Is it an infographic, a meme? What do you call that, Michelle?
Um, I would call it an infographic because there is a lot of information, but it reminded me, and I think we kind of had a very, very brief conversation about being aware of the underlying issues behind challenging days
Yeah.
when we talked about HALT. Was it
Yeah.
HALT?
Yep. Hungry,
That
angry,
acronym?
lonely, tired. Yep.
Yes, yes. So I really find that this kind of falls into it. And I'm glad that this is a conversation because I think it's important that we are aware of these needs. Um,
Mhm.
so often when I'm in a mood, we'll say,
Mhm.
it really does stem from something going on interiorly most of
Yeah.
the time, right? But I tend to just naturally project it outwardly. And it if it's misdirected like that, it can cause even more stress and more tension because you're creating unnecessary conflict, right? And
Yeah.
when it could be something easily fixable if we were attuned to some of these things like HALT, like the needs we're going to be discussing today.
Yeah, I think sometimes, like what you're saying, it's an easy fix. And there are times where there's nothing
Hmm.
that'll fix it, and you just need to sleep or you just need to like ride through what you're feeling, right? And feel what you're feeling. And there are sometimes where you need professional help. But
Right.
as we've talked about before, we like tackling some of the things that might actually work that are easy to do, and that's what this list is. And these things might seem obvious, but I've been a mom for almost for 14 years, and I'm reading going, yeah, all these things, I need all of these things. And so that's why we thought we'd share it with you guys. And we will share the original infographic on our show notes and on our social media accounts so you guys can see exactly what we're talking about. But I suspect many of you have already seen it this week because it really has made the rounds.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's a good one. So the first item on her list is we need opportunities to recharge. And there's this delightful image of an empty battery.
So
Right.
to me, this one is a little deeper than some of the other ones. To me, an actual recharge means unplugging from a few things too. Like, so it's actually a little time away from home. It's time out with friends or a date night with your husband. Things that actually require a little more scheduling,
Mm.
things that are a little harder to do for a lot of us. This is a little deeper than some daily self care, but I think it's the things that you go do where you truly feel recharged when you come home from it. Like we're talking a couple hours here, right? Not just a hot bath. So I don't know,
Hmm.
Michelle, what do you think about opportunities to recharge?
Yeah, I agree that these are often ones that may the most quickly fall by the wayside because they do require more planning and logistics, right?
Yeah.
The one example I keep coming back to is like how long I've been wanting to go on a retreat.
Yeah.
Right? I really feel like I could, that would be a great opportunity to recharge. But as a mom, it just hasn't happened for me in a long time. And I've struggled, I think, with the fact for a lot of years that these types of opportunities to recharge, they really do need to be asked for a lot of the
Yeah.
time. So I
Yeah.
would not get them, and I would just be building up this resentment that I wasn't getting it. Uh, but people are not mind readers. My husband is not a mind reader.
Yeah.
The people around me are busy with their own things and their own lives. So I've been trying to reframe this when I feel myself in need of a time to get out and recharge my batteries, just asking for it and being honest, saying, you know what, I need to get out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I find that people are often willing to help as best they can to make that happen. Okay, the next one she talks about is mental stimulation and looking for opportunities to use your mind. And I find that this is also something too. There's a difference between engaging your mind and also just being all thought out with daily tasks. You know what I mean?
Right. So you and I love this one, and this is something we actually talk
Hmm.
about and in a whole other episode. To me, mental stimulation is like you're saying, thinking about things that are beyond our ordinary tasks, where you do get thought like there's only so much I can think about the laundry or
That's
making kids
right.
lunches, right? And
Hmm.
so this can have a really really good effect, and then we can go overboard on it. So for me, the first thing that jumped into my mind is that this podcast in my own life, like this podcast saved my life.
Hmm.
I am not even being dramatic, like,
Same. I
right?
think so too. Yep, me
Yeah.
too.
It was
Hmm.
like I was standing at the edge of this new season in my life, and I'm like, my brain wants to do something, like it needs something. And doing this with you, Michelle, has just been given me this amazing opportunity to use my brain, use it in a whole new way than
Hmm.
just budgeting or making grocery lists and stuff like that. So we think everybody should have a podcast.
That's right. Yeah.
Right? That's all we're saying. Just start a podcast. But no, I'm talking here about like, so listening to other podcasts, reading the classics, not just reading, easy read books, like really challenging my brain with older types of literature,
Hmm.
watching documentaries. You and I, that's why we're friends. Like we love that type of thing so much. We joke about this all the time, that all we do is send each other links to more things that we can be mentally
Yes.
stimulated over. But then we also say to each other, too much. Like,
Yeah.
okay, I just want to think about making lunches now. Like maybe I
Yeah.
don't need to be worrying about the crisis in Iran or right. Like
Right.
there's so much we try to learn, you and I. So yeah, it can go a little too far. And then you need to then recharge from your mental stimulation.
Yeah, yeah, and you know what? I found this the case. I remember when I used to work part-time in youth ministry, and I worked up until my twins were 1 year old, and
Mhm.
then I just decided I needed to step back.
Yeah.
And I remember my priest, a good friend of mine at the time, he cautioned me to make sure that I looked for something else to fill that void with. And I
Mm,
didn't really quite know what he meant by that, but over the first year, I really didn't know what to do with myself, right? I was so used to having something else to think about that was
yeah.
different from my daily tasks at home. And it was actually pretty intellectually jarring.
Yeah. Yep.
So starting to find volunteering opportunities was a big thing for me that were in my particular wheelhouse, which was ministry. So maybe it didn't require the same commitment as a job, but it allowed me to use my mind a little bit, and it required me to do some reading, to do some research, and that kind of gave me a step back in. And then combined with the podcast, like what you were saying, I think a couple of weeks ago, I thought to myself, I'm like, wow, I think I'm close to reaching the capacity for a
Mm.
while of new things that I can put in here. And then I thought, wow, that capacity was bigger than I thought it was, because
Yeah.
it has been going on for a while. And
Yeah.
so I am astounded by how capable our minds are of constantly growing and evolving. And to me, that's just a very exciting thing. So finding opportunities for mental stimulation, I think, is something easy to do in whatever season you're in, and technology really aids that. And to find, if you're able to, like-minded people who will kind of spur you on. Okay, and so the next point she makes is uh, often we need to have a sense of accomplishment over something.
And that is exactly what you were just saying with how great it can feel as you're learning things, right? At a self-directed
Hmm.
pace. So it's perfect segue. But we've talked many times about how success breeds upon success, and how over the last couple of years of my life, I've had many things that I've accomplished and how great that feels. And it's just making goals, no matter what the goal is, right? Whether it's
Hmm.
losing weight or just keeping your sink clean every night. Like it's just making a goal and sticking with it. But something else I find is really important. I am blessed to be in a family. That's that's where God has placed me, with children and with a
Mhm.
husband. And Jason and I joke all the time that we hope the whole one flesh part of the sacrament of marriage is legit, because we're like, I hope I get to share in his accomplishments. Like when he wins a work award, I'm like, you're welcome, for me
Yes.
too. Like we
Yeah.
both won that. Me too. I'll get up with you. Or,
Yeah.
and he says that even with the podcast, he's so proud of us. He's like, man, I
Mm.
really hope God is proud of me for that too. That whole one flesh thing.
Yeah.
Because we really want to lean on each other. And Jason tells our kids all the time that when one of us wins, we all win. And when one of us loses, we all lose. And so I'm seeing the sense of accomplishment isn't selfish, that I am, again, part
Mhm.
of a family. So really sharing in that with my husband and kids is a great feeling.
Yeah, I love that, tying it to the family, because you're right. I think sometimes we don't see our families that way as an
Hmm.
accomplishment, right? But I mean, the family is something that we work really hard at,
Yeah.
many of us, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, to have those kinds of connections and relationships and know that you are trying your best all the time to foster those in whatever capacity you're able to, you should feel accomplishment over that.
Yeah.
And, and I love too what I'm discovering about accomplishment is that it does not have to be flashy.
Yeah.
So, what you're saying, right? It doesn't have to be huge because for so long, I've been the type of person who has tried to run before she can walk in so many areas.
Yeah.
I'm just like, wow, I want to. Oh, well, we were just kind of talking about sewing before we started recording,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
It's like perhaps I should learn how to sew, I don't know, buttons onto things, before I take on aprons.
We were
Like,
already selling aprons that you have made that are imaginary.
I
And
know,
you're
and
right.
I
You got to start with a
literally
button.
right, I literally just learned how to sew a button on something this winter,
Yeah.
and I sat down and I studied YouTube videos, and I just copied YouTube videos, but I honestly, the sense of accomplishment I felt when I sewed my son's mittens onto their coat, because I was tired of losing
Mm.
them for the millionth time. But I
Mhm.
sewed them on and I felt so proud. And I'm like, this is such a small thing, but it doesn't have to be big. Just looking for little moments of, I did this. And that really does fill something deep within us.
So the next thing on the list was food and water for my body, it says. And you know what? I have certainly learned this over the last couple of years as you guys have followed along on my trying to be healthy journey. I
Hmm.
cannot deny that when I eat healthy, I feel like $1,000,000, right? Like I literally don't feel like trash.
Right.
Like it's
Yeah.
like there
Huh.
seems to be no
That's
middle
crazy.
ground, right? Right? I either
Yeah.
feel like I am flying, like I am on top of the world, or like I can barely roll out of bed. And so one of those things makes an obviously a massive impact in my life, which is eating healthy. So when will I learn, Michelle?
Mhm.
When will I learn to just consistently do that? On top of the eating healthy, I have to say I also derive a lot of enjoyment from cooking. And obviously, I love
Mhm.
reading cookbooks, all types of cookbooks. We love trying new restaurants. Like food is a really important part in my life. And I've been working on just developing a healthier relationship with food overall, because, food, and not just physically, can make us feel bad, but when you have an unhealthy relationship with food, the emotional side of that can have a massive impact on our day. In fact, I have said to Jason, and it took me a long time to realize this, that sometimes when I'm depressed or standoffish with him, it's actually not
Mhm.
about him. It took me a long time to realize this. It's actually because I'm feeling so bad about myself. I don't even want to be close to
Mm.
him. And he always took that as me pushing him away. And I'm like, no, it's because I am so upset with my bloatedness or the way my body's feeling or any of those things. It's actually 100% about me. And so there's
Mhm.
so many layers to how food and nourishment impact our mood on a physiological level and on a psychological level.
Yeah, you know what? That is so interesting because I think, like you, I was also surprised in these last couple of years, really kind of playing around with just how I eat and what I'm eating, what I'm putting into my body. I didn't realize all of the things that were dependent on your nutrition, right? I
Mhm.
think we can get hung up, and weight is an important part of it, but I was really surprised by how it made my joints feel, how it made, my skin or my hair either shine or be kind of dull looking. Um, I was really intrigued by that. But to
Hmm.
pay particular attention out of prudence, even, what will you eat? When will you eat it? And be wise about that. If something's not working, change it up.
So the next one on the list is opportunities for social connection. And I really value my online friendships. I know we have talked before
Hmm.
about how we have to make sure that it isn't satisfying our inherent need for social connection and like replacing real life connections. But I do think, and this is the reality, and this is going to not go away, that we can value the relationships and friendships that we have made online and see that for what it is and be thankful for that and then still maintain our real life friendships. They both have an important role to play in my life
Hmm.
and I suspect in a lot of our listeners' lives. But one of the things I am starting to do again, and I do this with you and a few other friends, is we're starting to talk on the phone again. Um,
Yes.
I feel like because I'm in the season where I can get my house clean in ways and organized that I couldn't when I was having all the play dates and all the kids over, I have a lot of work I want to get done, but I still want to have those social connections. So again, let's use technology. Let's plug our headphones in like you and I do, pop
Hmm.
our phones in our aprons and talk with friends that way. Because
Yeah.
when you do have a lot of friends over and social visits, you do kind of put your life on hold. And it can be, a lot of friends will come over for 6 hours, 7 hours. Well, I'm losing a lot of time to get stuff done. So I love the idea of talking on the phone again, like we did it in the past, but also getting my chores done during the day. One last thing, and we did a whole episode on friendships, and I think it was a great episode. I reflect back on that one a lot. I think that it's important to embrace sometimes friendships of opportunity, people that you necessarily wouldn't have, not necessarily would have been friends with, maybe in your previous season in life, where we could be more choosy with who we wanted to hang out with. I think sometimes as
Hmm.
we get older, we're thrust into situations, maybe at a church social or parent groups at school, and you can find commonalities with these people and enjoy a great drink out with them, a good night out, but it's not going to be the same friendships you had maybe in your early 20s. And just going, yeah, this is
Hmm.
great for what it is. And I'm happy I have that. And then maybe in the future, you'll make deeper connections with people that you share more common interests with. But this idea that we can make friends, go out for a drink with them, and then, move on is really important in this stage of my life.
Hmm. Do you know what? That's so interesting because I've often reflected on the friendships of past generations, right?
Yeah.
Before social media, before technology could connect us to people of maybe more of our choosing, right?
Yeah.
If you were in a community, that was your community, right? And there would be people that didn't really suit or you didn't really get along with over much, or they just weren't your speed, but they were part of your group because
Yeah.
that's all there was around, and I was fascinated just watching how those generations in the past, they had more of an acceptance and a tolerance, and so I think that friendship was a little bit more balanced, like what you're trying to say, right? There
Mhm.
might be one, maybe two other women that you really felt a deep, deep connection to, but otherwise, everyone was just part of the crowd, and you were just part of the crowd. And that I think is really important to remember too, that we can often with social media we get kind of spoiled with only choosing to
Yes.
hang out with or talk to a certain kind of people or a
Yeah.
certain group of people, and we're really missing out if we're not aware of seeking those opportunities for social connection with a vast variety of people from all different kinds of walks of life. Okay, so seeking out opportunities for creativity now is another point on this preventing angry mom syndrome arsenal that we're having here. And you know what? One of the things I was trying to think what I do to be creative, and I think the podcast for sure. I get to be creative in a technical way, which I really love. But then I kind of broadened it out, and actually, social media has given me a lot of creative outlets in the past few years, in particular with how you word things for captions or for blogging.
Mhm.
And I love the photography aspect of Instagram. So many times I'll take pictures and like that's just purely for my own pleasure, fiddling with lighting and placements of things. So I really love that. Once again, technology is kind of an aid to some of these needs, and we can tap into technology and use them as a tool and a resource.
I've noticed too, I've that with technology and Instagram, how many other women are creative. And I want to celebrate
Hmm.
that. Like I see so many women doing creative things that I have no interest in doing. Like I am
Yeah.
never going to do crafts. I have never been a craft mom. I will never do them. But I'm talking like good quality stuff where then they start selling things on Etsy. I have a friend that's been making marshmallows like with different ingredients from scratch every single day. She's been on this big
Wow.
marshmallow bender and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this is killing me every time I see these gorgeous marshmallows." But these are moms that are busy who are like, "I want to try this." You were talking about wanting to learn how to sew again.
Yes.
I feel like I'm inspired again, like iron sharpens iron, being on social media instead of looking at that and going, "Well, I'm never going to do all that like the other moms." I look at it and I go, great job being so creative. Like it really does inspire me. So, again, I don't craft, but I do love decorating. And I look at my house as a continuous project of
Mm.
being able to express my creativity and my artistic side through design within our home. And the same thing with clothing and makeup and hair. I used to spend a lot more time and money on those things. I don't do that now, but I still pay attention to those in my everyday life because it's another way that I use to express my creative side.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and finally, the last one on the list. A need that we need to address often is this feeling of needing intimacy and feeling known by the people around us.
I think this one's really interesting because I think that there's three different paths for this. So the obvious one is my husband, right? Like
Hmm.
physical intimacy
Hmm.
with him and feeling known by him. And my favorite thing about my relationship with Jason is the longevity of it is the 20 years. We were driving home last night with the kids and we were playing music from the early 90s and we just knew what the other person would have been listening to in 1992. Like there was just such a closeness, like deeply knowing each other. And I would start one song and we would make eye contact and I knew what his memory was of that song, like and
Hmm.
that is a great feeling. That closeness of truly feeling known is amazing. Now, the next place where I have that is with a few close girlfriends. I have a best friend that I've been best friends with longer than I've been with Jason. We've been best friends for 25 years. Same thing happened on the weekend where we have so many shared memories. We don't know if it was her memory or mine. Like we constantly have to be like, did that happen to you or me?
Yeah.
And I was able to send her a photo of somebody we remembered from high school and she knew, like I didn't have to write anything. And this is 25 years ago. And she was right on
Mm,
board. So there's a
wow.
there's a piece with that just knowing that I don't have to say a word and she knows exactly what I'm thinking. But there's another person that if you don't have a marriage like that or a best friend like that, you have a relationship with God like that. And so
Mm,
that's the third part in my day where you can just sit in prayer. And I just say so many times while I'm praying, you know what's in my heart. Like I don't have the words for this. And God, our loving Father does know what's in our heart and in my heart. And so I really lean on that relationship as well. Have you seen that photo? Those letter boards that are so popular right now,
yes.
where all the
Hmm.
moms write the cute messages on them. Have you seen the one where it just says, Dear Jesus? And then they just poured all of the letters like a big jumbled mess
Yes.
on the board. And then it just says, thank you.
Yep.
That is like my prayer life, right? And it's so many people's prayer life,
Yes.
which is why we all get it. And so you might not have that intimacy right now. And there are so many people who don't. There's a news story about a grocery store chain that is actually training their staff to have longer interactions with the people that they're ringing through because they don't have that chance to talk or be like intimate in
Mm.
conversation with anybody else in their lives. And there are like hugging groups because people don't have somebody they'll go through. And I mean, we see this in policing, the houses Jason goes into. People will have 6-7 months where they haven't had somebody touch their hand. Like,
Wow.
there's such loneliness in this world. So if you're listening to this thinking, well, Lindsay, I don't have a husband like that. I don't have a best friend like that. You do have God, and really turn to him because I still need that relationship with God as the foundation of those other intimate relationships in my life.
Okay, it's time for our What We're Loving This Week segment of the show. So, Lindsay, what have you been loving this week?
Well, you remember when we went to Value Village, one of our local thrift stores, a little
Mhm.
while ago, a
Oh,
week ago,
yes.
and we were both blown away by this book, this vintage book called The Women's Day Encyclopedia of Cookery, right? And they only
Yep.
had volume 1 and they had volume 3. And we spent way too much time until the store closed looking through volume 1 and volume 3. And as I was trying to decide where to spend my $4.99. And we ended up going with volume 3 because it had the Christmas section in it, right? It was letters like C, the beginning of the C's. Anyways, I bought volume 3, loved it so much, rushed right back and bought volume 1. And so basically what I'm loving this week is this shameless plug to say, if anybody has the rest of the copies of the Women's Day Encyclopedia of Cookery, I need all of them. It is a fantastic book. I'm actually on an encyclopedia kick in general, and there's been a lot of talk about encyclopedias in general. I actually miss that. I don't want to Google anything. I'm kind of feeling like I want to buy an entire secondhand set of encyclopedias for my kids, because the idea of just flipping through and learning little bits here and there is exactly how my brain works. And so to have that for cookery is blowing my mind. So in the A's, it's like Austrian cooking. There is a 3-page article on schnitzel, Michelle. It was everything I
Wow.
didn't know I needed. It was just, these books are amazing. So I've shown them a lot on Instagram. If people are interested, I'll show some more on Instagram. But the Woman's Day Encyclopedia of Cookery is what I'm loving this week.
And you're welcome, because I found that. And I
Yes,
let
you
you have
did.
that,
Thank
remember?
you.
Yeah.
Yes, I'll share them back with you. We will.
Good
Yeah.
friends. Yes.
Yes. So what have you been loving this week?
You know what? I just finished a book by an author I've read in the past. And so I'm just going to say that the author is who I'm loving this week. And that is a woman named Judith Pella. I don't know if you've ever heard of her.
No.
She writes mostly historical fiction. There's a little bit of romance involved in it, and also with a Christian slant. So I really appreciate her writing. And I've had one of her series for a long time. It's called The Daughters of Fortune, and this series follows 3 American sisters, and they kind of go on their separate journeys through World War II around the world. And that has always been one of my favorite series. Each book focuses on one sister, but you see the other sisters in the peripheries of each book of the series. So you know what? I grab her books when I want something comforting, but it's still interesting because there is more of a historical fiction element in genre. And I'm just finishing up one of her books. It's called Bachelor's Puzzle, which is a quilting pattern I learned. And I just really enjoyed the intrigue. There's a bit of like a hidden identity plot line. It's an interesting look at what daily life was like in the West when they're first starting to settle the West, because that's the time period the story takes place in, and also to how women relied on each other. So this kind of goes back to our conversation about just appreciating the people who are immediately within your community. Because truly during that time, like the people who settled near you, those were your people. Despite differences, despite conflict, because you really needed one another to survive even. So that was really interesting to read about too. So her books are just quick. They're really easy to get into. And Judith Pella, she's just a wonderful comfort read. Okay, that's going to do it for us this week. If you want to get in touch and chat with us about our topic today, you can find us on our website, www.themodernlady1950.wordpress.com, or leave us a comment on Facebook or Instagram at The Modern Lady Podcast. I'm Michelle Sachs, and you can find me on Instagram at MMSachs.
And I'm Lindsay Murray, and you can find me on Instagram at Lindsay Homemaker.
Thank you so much for listening. Have a great week, and we will see you next time.